Thank you for joining us to the Citizens' Dialogue on Domestic Abuse in the times of coronavirus. Every crisis aggravates inequalities and creates new ones. The coronavirus crisis is no different. My thoughts are in particular with those who are marginalized because of a lack of financial means, ethnic minorities, LGBTI youth who are trapped in households which are hostile to them, and the elderly and disabled persons who are facing neglect at a time where they need most support. Today we are going to discuss domestic abuse. There is evidence that since the outbreak of the coronavirus, domestic violence towards women and children has increased. Some member states stepped up their efforts to offer protection in these circumstances, but we need to do more now and during the recovery phase. Member states should strengthen their support to national helplines and raise awareness among citizens. The prevention and support services for victims and witnesses of domestic violence should be declared essential services to allow them to work at full capacity. Member states must continue to enforce the Victim Rights Directive and the Council of Europe's Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence. The Commission is supporting member states in exchanging good practices on preventing gender-based violence and domestic violence and funding organizations to tackle this problem. At the beginning of April, the Commission launched the EU Solidarity for Health initiative to support the healthcare systems of member states, to provide 6 billion euros for purchasing emergency support. This pandemic is a test for humanity. Let us beat it together. And now, let me hear your thoughts and questions.
Hello and welcome to a live chat today on domestic abuse in times of coronavirus crisis. Welcome Commissioner Dalli, Commissioner for Equality, with us here in the studio. Welcome, Commissioner. For our viewers, we also have today translations available into Italian and Spanish. So if you watch on EBS, you can switch to your preferred language. Without further ado, let me go into Q&A with you, Commissioner. Let me start with a first question myself, to make it very practical. What do you do if you are experiencing domestic violence or believe someone else is experiencing it or you're observing it?
Well, obviously, we in spite of the situation we are in, we still have the right to seek help. And I know that various member states have worked around also this situation, because we have to understand that some women especially and children may be confined in limited spaces with their abusers. So the various member states have been very creative in how to deal with this situation, because sometimes it is not always easy to use your phone or speak, because your abuser might be hearing you speak on the phone. So there were various initiatives which were taken by various member states, such as having the pharmacist set the alarm, in the sense that you report there, and then they will do the rest in terms of calling the police and all that. So in that way, it's less suspicious that the perpetrator, your abuser, the person who is using violence against you, will not be aware that you are reporting the situation. Obviously, there are other means, the usual means of reporting, but as I said, it's not always easy to do that. But there's also the specialist service of WAVE, the Women Against Violence, who have all the information you can get with regards to how to deal with this problem in all the member states. And I thank them for the great service which they are giving. Obviously, there's also the 112 and for the children's helpline, 116111. But obviously, this is what was there always in these situations. So what we are looking at and what we have been doing during this crisis is to see how to present different means and ways of reporting. I'm glad to see that all the member states are doing this in one way or another, and there is also a lot of information sharing and experience sharing. I also wrote to equality ministers in all the member states to up the ante when it comes to these situations, because it is really a situation where really the problem has been compounded by the fact that we are confined into spaces. I mean, if you have a good relationship and there's serenity in your home, that is very good. But we know that there are many families who do not live in these situations. So obviously, being confined in these spaces has made the situation even worse.
Let me add a question in this context to go a bit deeper into what you just began elaborating. We got a question via Facebook from Bailey, who is asking, how can you properly tackle domestic violence in these times? And what if one or both of the partners does not want to cooperate? And the second question, which goes in the similar direction from the European Women's Lobby, is with the current COVID-19 crisis, the situation has worsened. There would be a 30 to 50% rise in violence against women and girls. What is the European Commission doing to ensure the EU urgently acts to end this widespread human rights violation?
Yes. In the letter which I addressed to all equality ministers, I stressed the fact that prevention and support in this area of policy should be regarded as an essential service. But obviously, we know also that there is the Victims' Rights Directive, and there is also the Istanbul Convention for those countries which have ratified the convention, where you have the framework whereby that is where these victims can be helped and they can be given protection for their situation. But obviously, law enforcement should carry on, and these situations of violence should not be deprioritized because of the COVID-19 situation. Okay, so obviously law enforcement is of the essence, but there are the other legal instruments which come into these situations. But also it is very important that this is regarded, prevention and support are regarded as essential services. They should always be regarded as essential services because we know that there is a lot of pain and suffering in these situations, but especially in this COVID-19 context, even the more so, support and prevention should be regarded as essential services.
I have another question which we received via our Facebook page of the Commission representation in Italy from Roberto. And he asks, I would like to point out that in Italy, men victims of domestic violence are excluded from being protected. Is it possible to do something to extend the protection in order to include men who are victims of violence? So what about men?
Yes, this is a question very close to my heart, because if I go back to my previous life as ministers, one of the first things I did when I was given the portfolio for equality in 1996 was to present a white paper on domestic violence, whereby I made it a point that this legislation, which was then introduced, is for everyone. It's gender neutral, because we know that there are situations whereby, as Roberto is saying, there are men who are victims of these situations of violence. And violence is not only physical violence. There can be psychological violence, there can be financial violence. There are many forms of violence. And I wanted to be sure that any legislation in this area of policy is gender neutral. But also the Commission, when it speaks about gender-based violence, that is why we speak about gender-based violence, because it's not for women only. Okay, so that is the words which we use, and we use those words obviously with a purpose. Even the Istanbul Convention speaks about gender-based violence. So I encourage men also to report if they are in these situations. Obviously, we know that it is the majority which are women who are in these situations, but when it is a man who is in this situation, there are all the rights in this area of policy. What I can say also in this, and which is a difficulty, is that because of stereotyping, men might find it more difficult to report. And this comes also from the training which needs to be given and continue be given, because I know that some member states give it, to the people who have to enforce the laws, and where the victims go to report, that they don't treat men differently, because some men find it a bit embarrassing for them to go and report violence against them by a woman. Okay, so this is something which we need to change too, because we can have all the good legislation and all the good intentions in the world, unless we change attitudes, we will not get the results which we will be aiming for when we legislate. So this is gender-based violence, and it's for everyone, and even the Victims' Rights Directive doesn't choose women over men, but it's for everyone. So I encourage all people, whether they are men, whether they are women, because also in our strategy we go into intersectionality. So whether it's a man, it's a woman, whether it's a disabled person or an LGBTIQ person, nobody should live in situations of violence, and there is a remedy. So go and seek this remedy, whoever you are, and in whatever category society chooses to put you. Don't be embarrassed. The person who should be embarrassed is the perpetrator, not the victim. So this is why we do all this work, so that people can go and seek redress and live serene lives without violence. So really, I would encourage everybody who is in these situations. Nobody deserves to be in a situation of violence, and that is why we push for the ratification of the Istanbul Convention, because to me that is the gold standard when it comes to gender-based violence. And we should speak more about these realities, because they are very, very sad and dangerous, obviously, because we know that people get killed also in these situations. And it is understandable that people understand when we speak about domestic violence, they understand it's about women, because if you see the number of women who are killed in these situations, it by far outnumbers the numbers of men. But to me, even if there is one man, I think he should know what there is in terms of redress for him and where he can seek help. And also we speak about, even in the convention, about the help which the perpetrators need. Because for a person to resort to violence, there is something wrong with him or her, because if we are discussing something, if we are arguing, if we disagree, it doesn't mean that any one of us has the right to become violent. So if you do that, or if I do that, then I must seek help, and there is help. And it is imperative that perpetrators seek help, because otherwise what happens is that, okay, he is separated from the victim, but if he doesn't get this help, this treatment, which is necessary for him or for her, then he or she will have another partner, and the cycle of violence begins again. So this is a very important aspect also, that the perpetrators get the help which is necessary for them not to repeat what they have been doing with another person. So I think that is very, very important.
Thank you very much. That was very clear. So violence and domestic abuse can concern also men and many, or basically everyone in principle. That brings us to our next question, which comes from Marine via Facebook, who asks, how does the EU work with member states to address violence faced by the most marginalized groups, especially those living in closed settings, such as women and girls with disabilities in institutions, and those who often have no access to support services for victims? Once again, thinking about women with disabilities, but also migrant women, for instance.
Okay. I mentioned before that I wrote to equality ministers in all member states, and I did bring up the issue of intersectionality. Okay, and I mentioned here also. So as the person who put the question, sorry, I didn't get the name. Marine, as Marine asked, yes, of course, that there are people with disabilities also who are in these situations, and that is why we speak about looking at these realities, not in terms of women and men or in any other pigeonholes which we can put people, because a person can be many things. You can be a woman, you can be a woman with a disability, you can be a woman with a disability coming from a minority background, okay? So when you have all these forces at play, obviously the problem of violence in this case, because we're discussing violence, is compounded, and that is why in our gender equality strategy we speak about intersectionality and how this affects people in their lives, and how are we to address it. Also, in terms of people with disability, obviously we have the UN Convention for the Rights of People with Disabilities, which we have to adhere to, and I can say also that there's 6 billion euros, which the EU is using a Solidarity for Health initiative, it's called. So also there we are helping with support services in these cases. So there is a lot which the EU is doing. Of course, it's never enough. You can never do enough in these situations, because the more you go into the reality, the more you discover how big the problem is, and how much attention it needs. And it's not just the legislation, obviously the funding for NGOs which work in these areas of policies, and in order to reach as many people as we can. But obviously we know that we never reach everyone, so it's a constant struggle to keep this reality on the agenda, because people who are not affected by the reality of violence maybe do not think that it is so pervasive. But I can tell you that it is, because if you speak with members of parliament who are in constant contact with their constituencies, with their citizens, and they tell them of their realities. When you speak with civil society, with NGOs, especially those who work in this area of policy, you will see what a big reality this is. So that is why I say we can never do enough. We can never put enough money into dealing with this problem, because it is a very big problem, and especially obviously it's been compounded now in this COVID-19 situations, whereby families are restrained to live together all the time, and sometimes in very small spaces. So this exacerbates the problem, and therefore, in our response to it, we have to put in these billions which I've been speaking about, and we have to keep constant contact with the EU ministers, the equality ministers in all the member states, and also stay in contact with all the NGOs who work for women, who work for violence situations, so that we can support in the best way that we can, and also that we speak about this reality, because we know also that violence within the family is one of the most underreported crimes. And in this situation, we have seen an increase in reporting, but I still believe that a lot is going unreported because of the problems which I mentioned before, because many victims would think twice about reporting if their abuser is within earshot, which in these situations it is likely for them to be within earshot. And that is why we've been seeing how the different member states are tackling this problem. I know also of member states who are offering free legal service, because sometimes that is a problem too, that victims cannot afford to get a lawyer in these situations. So there are also member states who are giving this service for free, because they could see that this problem is seriously growing within this COVID-19 situations, and that is why I said member states are being creative in helping in the various situations which they are learning about, but also because there is a lot of awareness raising right now, which everybody who is concerned is doing, so that we can reach out to those people who are inside their homes and don't know what to do, or are afraid to do something in case their situation then gets worse, because they have had the courage to speak out. You know, so that, and that's not easy to do when you are living with your perpetrator. So I strongly believe that the more we focus and speak about these situations, I think that it will help those who have not come forward yet, those who have not reported.
Good. Commissioner, we're receiving a lot of questions online, so it seems there's quite some interest on this topic, which is a good sign. But I'll try to swiftly now go to a few more questions so that we can answer to as many people as possible during the chat. So let me go to the next one we received from Irene via Facebook. All forms of violence against women and girls are part of the same phenomenon and resulting from discrimination women face on a daily basis in the EU. As Commissioner for Equality, what are you doing to address all forms of violence against women and girls as a continuum?
Yes, we must address discrimination on a daily basis, because it's happening all the time. So we have to address it all the time, and that is why in March we came out with our gender equality strategy, where one of the key objectives is gender-based violence, and we are also speaking about challenging stereotypes. As I was telling you earlier, you know, these stereotypes do a lot of harm to people, so we must challenge those stereotypes. We also are also speaking about the gender pay gap and the gender gap in the labor market, women's participation in the labor market, and then the gender pay gap and the gender pensions gap, and the equal participation of women and men in the economy, which we know that is not so. There isn't this equal participation of women in the economy. And you might be asking me, but what does women's participation in the economy have to do with gender-based violence? It has a lot to do, because one of the problems of many, in this case, women who remain and stay in abusive relationships and who do not report abusive relationships is because they are financially dependent on their abuser. Okay, so it is of the essence that women are financially independent. And that will, I'm not saying that women who are financially independent cannot become victims of violence or of domestic violence, but with the difference that if you are financially independent and you can sustain and maintain your children, you can leave that relationship. Whilst if you are depending on your abuser, you cannot leave with your children, but your children will have to continue witnessing violence, if not being victims themselves as well. And you cannot do much to change the situation. And many times women in these situations do not report, because they say, you know, what can I do? I still have to live in this house. I still have to depend on my partner, who is the person who is abusing me, who is the perpetrator of this violence, so that I can feed my children. So there's this situation and there's this link, and that is why in the strategy we are speaking also about stereotypes, also in the sense on how children define their roles and how do we teach them about knowing that they can achieve whatever they work for in their lives, and nobody should compartmentalize them and tell them, no, this is a boy's job and this is a girl's job, and you know, so we have to start from kindergarten, from that we eliminate these stereotypes, and that nobody is born to stay at home while somebody else goes out to work, but we must all have the capacity to be homemakers and also to contribute to the economy and to be, and therefore to be in the labor market. And we are learning also with this COVID experience that we are seeing how people are working from home and sharing responsibilities. So that is something, you know, we have the work-life balance directive, but I was already following up on member states to see how they are dealing with this directive, how they are putting it into place. But now we are seeing these realities of parents being at home together, and how are they sharing their responsibilities, their work responsibilities and their family responsibilities.
Let me bring in a question here, because it follows up directly on what you just mentioned on the economic argument for women in this situation. It's a question we received via Facebook Spain from Virginia Mirave, who asks, according to unemployment data, women are victims of the economic and labor crisis caused by the COVID-19. Yes. Unemployment situations often cause violence, as we just discovered. Does the EU provide specific aid to women to return to work?
Yes, in fact, we are saying that COVID does not discriminate, and so we must not discriminate in our response. And it's true that women are being disproportionately hit by the situation. Okay, I know that more men are dying, but we are not speaking about health here. We are speaking about situations whereby many women are on the front line, because many women are carers, are social workers, are cleaners, are working in supermarkets. So there are many women there. And also we know that there are many women who are working in precarious employment, precarious conditions of work. We also know that there are many women in the informal economy who now have nothing to fall back on. There is no social services, social benefits to support them while they have lost their jobs. So it is a very, very precarious situation for women, and we can say that women are being disproportionately affected by these situations. So we are seeing that in all that we do in terms of recovery, that we address this reality, because we are seeing, I had a webinar last week with UN Women, and we were women from all over the world, and essentially they all said the same thing, of how women are worst hit, not from the health aspect, but from the aspect of how they are living their lives, how their work has been affected, how their conditions, or how their standard of living is being affected, because they are the first to be let go in terms of unemployment, and so we are facing a very, very, very it's a very serious situation for everyone. But if in your previous in your work you didn't have good conditions of work, you weren't getting the rights which you should be getting as a worker, and now all of a sudden you find yourself unemployed, with not much to fall back on. So that is a very serious situation. And also we know that the majority of single parents are women also. So sometimes it's not just, many times it's not just for yourself, but also for the children which you are supporting. So there are so many facets to this COVID-19 reality. We are seeing so many different realities, and the more we share these experiences, as I said, we had this meeting from women from all over the world, and what was interesting that we were again speaking about the feminization of this COVID-19 reality, in the sense of, like, we speak about the feminization of poverty, and this is not different, because many people, but especially women, are on the poverty line because of the consequences of COVID-19. So there's a lot of work which we have to do there, and then add to all this a situation of violence. So really, we're in a very bad way when we listen to these situations, sometimes directly, because we obviously speak directly to people, but sometimes through our parliamentarians, sometimes through civil society, who are doing great work in these situations. But it's not a good picture that we have.
Let me bring in a different topic. We're approaching the end already. We received a question related to FGM. Chiara for End FGM via Facebook asks, thank you very much for the opportunity. On behalf of End FGM European Network, I would like to ask the following questions. How will the EU ensure to keep supporting and funding NGOs working on GBV and particularly on FGM currently and in the future, given the fact that there is a huge shift in prioritization of the budget towards COVID-19 response programs?
Yes, this is very worrying. I've heard about funds being cut off, and also in situations whereby NGOs then will have to get rid of some staff, and also to have less services available because there isn't this funding. But the EU will continue to fund these are our organizations, and we are vigilant on this, and we are in constant contact with these NGOs, and as you rightly said, yes, these situations can be deprioritized in this situation which we find ourselves in. Because sometimes the economy takes center stage, and obviously I understand that we all need to feed our families, so the economy is very, very, very important. But also this is not just an economic union. This is a union of values. So at this time, we cannot afford to put our values on the back burner because you may have the financial stability, but if your rights are taken away from you, or if you are discriminated against and there's no remedy for you, still you wouldn't be living the life which every citizen deserves to live. So we must remember this, that we must not put our values on the back burner because we are all concentrated on the economy. I think we can do both. We can do both, and our work has continued as a commission during, I think, that I can even say that our work has been stepped up in this situation. And we have continued working on, for instance, if I were to take the equality sector, on our pay transparency proposal. We continued working on our LGBTIQ strategy, which all this we have promised for the end of this year. We have continued working on our strategic framework for Roma inclusion. Okay, so we are still doing this work. So it's not as if everything stopped and we're only working on the economy. So we can do more things at the same time. But I understand that people are saying this because there is out there somehow the impression that our rights and our values are being deprioritized. But I don't think that that is happening, in the sense that obviously we are working in these areas day and night so that we can deliver, and so that we are vigilant on the various situations in member states where there could be discrimination, or there could be a diminishing of rights. Okay, so that is what we are doing, but we have to remember that we are a union of values who are very important, very dear to us, and I think that it is what makes us, whole persons. It's not just the money, although of course the money is very important.
Thank you very much. We're running already a little bit over time. If you're okay, we could take a very last question, which we received from Piotr via the Online Citizens Dialogue group on Facebook, and brings us in a way back to the first question, to make it concrete, because it's about helplines. So, is the Commission aware of systemic defunding of women's rights organizations in Poland? Can the Commission directly support organizations running much needed helplines now, when their work is of immense importance?
Yes, in fact, I will reiterate. Yes, we are aware of these situations where their funding is being cut, and as I said, the Commission will continue to fund these organizations. We give all the support which we can give, and it is good that people speak up about these realities, because absolutely we cannot afford to have services cut. Actually, they should be increased. And again, that is why I communicated directly with all the equality ministers in member states to point out how important it is for them to step up support and services. And some of them have. Some of the member states have, and I am very happy about that. But then you hear about these situations which you have just mentioned, and of course we have to look into these situations when we know about them, and offer all of our support.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I think these were very appropriate concluding remarks. Thank you for following us on EBS or online on this EU dialogue on the coronavirus response. Thank you very much, Commissioner, once again.